Picture this. You're rushing through an incredibly crowded Tokyo train station. Suddenly, you look down and spot a wallet just sitting there on the floor. It's absolutely stuffed with cash, credit cards, identification, the whole shebang. So what happens next? Well, if you're in Japan, it is highly likely that this wallet is going to be turned in and literally nothing will be missing. It's an amazing thing to see. But it also presents this really fascinating philosophical puzzle. You see, Japan is a society where relatively few people organize their daily lives around an exclusive religious belief. So where does this remarkable display of honesty and social responsibility come from?
Welcome to today's Explainer. We are diving headfirst into a deeply thought-provoking source text titled, "Could Japanese Culture Succeed Where Religion Has Failed?" And let me tell you, this is a wild thought experiment. The text presents an imaginary, intellectually rigorous conversation between some absolute historical and spiritual heavyweights. We're talking Jesus, the Dalai Lama, Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, Islamic scholar Hamza Yusuf, and Japanese Zen priest Shunmyo Masuno. It neutrally explores a massive question. If religions have spent millennia teaching us how to live, why does a highly secular society sometimes seem to be better at actually putting moral behaviors into practice?
All right, here is our roadmap for the discussion. First up, the lost wallet test. Second, civility versus compassion. Third, the paradox of religion. And finally, discover the rest.
Okay, let's jump right into Section 1, the lost wallet test.
Right off the bat, the experts in our text start debating what that returned wallet actually represents. Is it a triumph of religious moral teaching, or is it just an ingrained secular civic habit? So on one side, you have moral conviction. This is where a person sees the wallet, feels that sudden temptation to take it, but defeats that temptation through a deeply held spiritual belief. But on the flip side, you have moral habit. This is where someone is formed by their society in such a way that stealing barely even registers as an option. The wallet is returned simply because, well, that's just what you do. It's muscle memory.
I really love how Zen priest Shunmyo Masuno frames this in the conversation. He points out that for society to actually function, habit might honestly be way more effective than high spiritual aspiration. Think about it. Your neighbor doesn't necessarily need you to achieve profound, universal-altering compassion. They mostly just need you not to blast your music on the morning commute. As he so perfectly puts it, a society can't depend on everyone becoming a saint. Millions of ordinary people just have to figure out how to get through Tuesday together.
But then, the text throws us a really uncomfortable curveball. What if instead of a wallet lying there, it's a person? What if there's someone sitting against the wall in visible distress? Returning property is a clean, easy transaction. Interfering with a suffering stranger, though, that is entirely different. And this is exactly where cultural restraint, that ingrained habit of not inconveniencing others, suddenly hits a brick wall. People might walk right past that suffering person simply out of a desire to respect their privacy or to avoid causing a public scene.
Which brings us perfectly to Section 2, civility versus compassion.
The text sets up this brilliant, neutral contrast between two huge foundational philosophies. On the left, we have do not trouble others. This is all about civic harmony, restraint, and making sure we respect shared spaces. On the right, we have love your neighbor. That is a heavy spiritual demand that requires active intervention, even when it is incredibly inconvenient for you. The speakers debate which of these actually creates a more functional and truly caring society.
So the cornerstone of that civic harmony argument is the Japanese concept of miwaku okakenai, which translates roughly to do not cause trouble for others. This concept is the linchpin that beautifully creates consideration for everyone in a shared public space. It's exactly why the trains are so wonderfully quiet and the streets are so spotless. It teaches this hyper-awareness that your actions have very real consequences for the people around you. But, and this is absolutely crucial, there is a much darker, heartbreaking side to that exact same restraint. Masuno points out that do not cause trouble can very easily turn inward. It morphs into do not become trouble for others. In this scenario, people who are elderly or sick or just desperately lonely will completely hide their suffering. They'll refuse to ask for help because they are terrified of becoming a burden to their families or to society as a whole. An ethic that teaches deep respect can, entirely by accident, teach people to suffer in total isolation. And this is where the character of Rabbi Jonathan Sacks steps in with a really compelling counter-argument. He argues that a society built entirely on polite compliance will eventually break down. Why? Because sooner or later, a situation is going to pop up that requires an act of courageous, messy, inconvenient love. Someone is going to need you to defend them, even when it ruins your own reputation. Someone needs you to stand completely alone. Civility and social rules simply cannot mandate that kind of courage. The Dalai Lama in our text kind of synthesizes this beautifully. He observes that a flourishing civilization actually needs 3 distinct levels of human interaction. First, civility, just behaving in a way that lets us share space without driving each other crazy. Second, morality, doing what is right, regardless of whether it's easy or convenient. And third, compassion, actually allowing another person's suffering to matter to you on a personal level. To really thrive, we need all 3 of these working together.
All right, moving on to section 3, the paradox of religion.
Here, the text poses a pretty stark, challenging question, and it's raised by the figure of Jesus. Did religion fail humanity, or did religious communities simply become obsessed with belonging rather than actual transformation? It really asks us to neutrally examine the massive gap between the incredibly high moral ideals that religions teach and the messy historical reality of how religious institutions have actually behaved over the centuries.
The speakers draw this wild, surprising parallel here. They suggest that secular social harmony and religious institutions actually face the exact same human temptation. They can both devolve into mechanisms of forced conformity. Just like a secular culture can quietly, invisibly punish someone for not fitting in, a religious community can demand absolute tribal loyalty. They end up punishing anyone who asks difficult questions or steps out of line.
Islamic scholar Hamza Yusuf provides this fascinating step-by-step breakdown of how that decay happens. It starts with a beautiful spiritual revelation, which becomes a call. That call naturally builds a community of like-minded people. Then the community develops specific practices that forge a really strong identity. But then, that identity starts establishing boundaries, who is in and who is out. And finally, those boundaries can create fear and exclusion of the outsider. So this transformative spiritual path just slowly calcifies into a rigid tribal identity.
The source material offers such a powerful critique of this tribalism. The Jesus figure suggests that religion becomes deeply problematic when it just comforts its followers, confirms their biases, and never demands anything difficult from them. Basically, if your belief system perfectly aligns with your own ambitions, and it never once asks you to forgive an enemy or protect someone outside your group, well, maybe it's not a genuine spiritual path. Maybe it's just a sacred justification for your own ego.
But despite all these incredibly sharp criticisms, the experts in the text argue that religion still provides something vital that secular culture really struggles to replace. It provides a vocabulary of intrinsic human dignity, meaning you have absolute worth even if you aren't socially or economically useful. It demands care for the stranger, the person outside your immediate tribe. And crucially, it gives the individual a profound reason to stand alone and do the right thing, even when being good offers absolutely zero social advantage.
And that brings us to our final section, Discover the Rest.
Listen, we have only barely scratched the surface today. The rest of the source material dives into some incredibly deep waters. It explores the dark side of Japanese harmony, concepts like kuki, or reading the air, and the crisis of hikikomori. It critiques the hard limits of individualistic Western freedom, and most importantly, it explores what an ultimate synthesis of all these global philosophies would actually look like. We just literally do not have the runtime to cover all of that today.
But you can, and honestly, you absolutely should explore the rest of this brilliant conversation for yourself. To read the full remainder of the source material and uncover those final resolutions, just head over to imaginarytalks.com to check out the full piece. It is absolutely worth your time.
I want to leave you with one final provocative thought from the text to chew on as you go about your day. What would happen if we actually managed to build a society, or, even just our own individual lives, that perfectly balanced deep social consideration for others, profound spiritual depth, and the unbreakable courage of an individual conscience? How can you start balancing those powerful forces in your own life today? Thanks so much for joining me, and keep learning.